Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about psychedelics and plant medicine, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and for everyone who is listening or watching, welcome to the show. Now, for today's episode, we're actually following up on one of the most successful episodes that this podcast has released so far, episode 4 to be specific. And that is an episode in which we assembled a focus group of regular people, who I don't think, by the way, are all that regular, really. But they're ordinary folks who are not from the psychedelic world. They are not shamans, they're not facilitators, they're not scientists, they're not advocates. They're just regular folks who are on the street, just like me, probably just like you, who were curious but didn't know a lot about psychedelics and had questions that they wanted to have answered. And in fact, the theme of this episode, where we've all gathered together again, is exactly the same as the title of that earlier episode was, Answering the Questions Matter. So all of the panel participants today have listened to at least some of the Webdelics episodes. All of them may have thoughts, opinions, feelings, or other questions that we're going to explore. All of them have committed to being honest, keeping it real, and sharing anything that they may have learned. So without further ado, let's start by having these amazing individuals introduce themselves. I'm going to go round robin. Everyone just say who you are, share a minute or so about yourself, and then we're going to get into the meat of the episode. I am starting with you, Ms. Adkins. Ms. LaChelle Adkins, who are you? Well, I asked you this before. What are you doing on my screen? Shoot, tell me.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Scott. I'm excited to get into this conversation. I am LaChelle, also known as America's Supermom. I'm the mother of 15 children, and I'm a vitality coach. I help professionals navigate through the chaos and overwhelm of everyday life and transform that into clarity and confidence with a smile. So I'm excited to really get more into these episodes because it's helping me in navigating being a mother, being a first lady. My husband's a pastor and a community leader. Just being able to hear the different perspectives that can help me be a better version of myself and also be more understanding and hearing perspectives of others. So I'm glad to be here.
We are so glad to have you. Kevin DeStefano, you weren't here last time due to a last-minute conflict, but you are every bit as essential to this panel as anyone else. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I am beyond excited to be here first with Scott and with everybody on this call. My name is Kevin DeStefano, and I'm a senior manager for a home care software company where we primarily serve people that have disabilities. So for me, the reason why this topic is so important to me is because, number one, I wanted to learn more about psychedelic itself. I've heard some of the most successful people in this world has utilized psychedelics, and potentially it could help communities with disabilities. So I'm excited to discuss this topic with this group, ecstatic to talk with you, Scott, and with this entire group. And I look forward to our conversations.
Thank you. And I'm very excited about them too. MH, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, first, Scott, thank you so much for warming us all up. It's always a fun time being here with you. And of course, you have the most amazing people. And it is always an honor to be here. For just a really quick recap, my name is MH. I'm currently a graduate student. And ultimately, I'm very interested in learning from different people and experiences. And really, as tacky as it sounds, I think my life's mission is to make the world a better place. And I feel having valuable conversations like these really inspires me. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And once again, thank you for inviting me to the Webdelics podcast. Looking forward.
Thank you. And MH, I've got to say, I'm all about the tacky. Last, but very much not least, Rita. I see you smiling there. Don't get bashful on me. Who are you?
Hi, Scott. Talking to you from my kitchen in Kauai. a co-founder of Spiritual Living Kauai. I work as a full-time teacher. I love this Webdelics. I just enjoy the podcast and that I've heard, and because I'm all about healing, and I know there's methods of healing and all about wholeness. That's what I do as a living. I help people to get back to themselves and who they really are. So I'm just excited to see how this is going. Old Scott, it's I learned a lot from what I've listened to so far.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. And so much of what Webdelics is about is plant medicine as a modality for healing. So I'm just going to throw out, answer as you see fit. You don't need to wait for me to call on you. But if no one says anything, I'm going to start picking on folks. Let's just have a little bit of a free-for-all conversation. Last time we talked, people had questions. They had concerns. They had fears about the psychedelic renaissance, about plant medicines and what they would mean for people's ability to heal and for the future of our society and our culture. The first set of episodes that we've produced so far have been about what psychedelics and plant medicines are, scientifically, how they work, how they impact the brain, and how they are going to impact our culture from all perspectives, including the economy, the law, race relations, religion, even poverty. So, everybody, let's start by asking the obvious. Having listened to Webdelics podcast episodes, have your thoughts, your feelings, or anything else that you might have reacted to when you first heard about the psychedelic renaissance and about the Webdelics podcast, psychedelics more generally as a healing modality, have any of those things changed? And if so, let's talk about that.
For me, Scott, yes. So I was naturally a skeptic of psychedelics themselves. However, what I learned through the podcast is that one of the topics or one of the main talking points that was discussed was you don't have to continuously take psychedelics to get to a point where you need to get to. And I thought that was so profound and so important because a lot of the resistance towards taking any type of drugs in general, specifically to psychedelics, is you have to continuously take a drug. And a lot of people feel resistant to that. But with psychedelics, you don't have to do that. You can take it for a very short amount of period of time, not get addicted to it, and have these massive changes to your overall health that could benefit your personal life, whether or not you're having mental health issues or to further your career. So it's changed my perspective that way.
Thank you so much. Is Kevin the only one?
Well,
I would say, I would say for myself, I was very skeptical at first. I still am skeptical for certain reasons, but what I really got from the for listening to the different experts that you had on, scientists, and what I got was that there are different ways of healing. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to find wholeness. And I believe that this is a way to find wholeness. But my skepticism comes from what Kevin just said. I don't know if I believe that a person wouldn't need it. Like, would they be able to stop and not go back? I'm not saying that it's addictive, but the experience might be so euphoric that perhaps that I got the impression from some of the recordings that people did it for a long amount of time, and also because I believe we're all going to the same place. We're all wanting wholeness. We're all wanting healing. And I deal with this with clients all the time. And there's certain people that come to me that I know would benefit from this. So I loved what Colette said about the safety aspects, the preparation, what were the things that safe that you should be prepared for it. You need a safe environment. You need to be aware of the neurological effects, which is one of the things that concerned me a little bit because I do a lot of meditation work. I know about the power of our brains and circuiting and all of that. I'm not a scientist, but I wondered about what it actually does to our brain. And that kind of concerned me a little bit because I'm really concerned about my brain and what how it affects. Then the other that is support. So I think it was like, what is it really doing to my brain? And I know through meditation, I've worked a long time, 20 years or more on working on brain, changing how I think, how I perceive things. I didn't do it through a one mystical experience. It was like a process. And then I thought to myself, well, are we going to lose the process of the journey that we take when we are evolving as human beings? So, yeah, I think for some people, it would be totally necessary. The other concern I had when I listened to it was the drug industry. But that person said that it's starting from not the drug industry isn't starting this. It's evolving from the plant, the natural cause. The drug industry can't like that. I don't know if I heard that right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm worried about like lower income people would access it, have the help. So it's a whole question still, but I definitely shifted that. I realized that it's necessary for certain people to have this experience that would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Well, and I think both of you guys have brought up great points. And I think, I feel that I have had an open mindset about it being an option for healing. And those are some great concerns about, the impact that it can have. But, one of the things that I have found that when we're talking about healing and certain things, sometimes we have the tendency, I think, to be kind of more legalistic, where we can really dive into this real long drawn out Q&A about some of these things, but we will serve kids things like Takis and stuff that has red dye that we find is really not healthy for our bodies. And so we have this way of however things are packaged is really the precursor for how it's received in the world. And so if you're giving people food, a lot of times, even if it's sugar, ice cream, and different things that are pleasing temporarily, we look at it as it's okay, we can indulge, and, it could be just as harmful. So I think really hearing these stories has really opened up my mind to really seeing how we can be more I don't know, but just being more embracive about how we are introducing things to people and our bodies, because it's not just where we're talking about these type of things when it comes to healing, but some of the things that we do that are disadvantageous to our healing, is also a factor. So I think a lot of the people who share things, they were very open and honest about their experiences, which really helps to look more inside within yourself to examine some of those things, as really being a spectator and asking different questions so that we can get to a resolution that is beneficial for everybody.
Well, and MH, I'm going to give you a chance to talk in a second, but there's something in what you just said, LaChelle, that I do feel compelled to address. As the host of this show, and as someone who is not from the psychedelic world, when I began taping the episodes, I went around to friends of mine and told them what I was doing. And what you were talking when you were talking about some of like the sugars and these other things that we ingest in our bodies thoughtlessly or that we give to our children. Interesting conversations that show how framing things matters came up. So for instance, I had a number of people say, oh, I would never do psychedelics because I only believe in remedies that are natural. And so I had to point out that actually mushrooms are natural and that ayahuasca, or some of these other sacred plants that people have been using for thousands of years, actually are natural. But the framing of these things as drugs had put them mentally in a different category. So they couldn't see them what I believe to be a holistic way, or at a very minimal way, they were seeing things like mushrooms as outside of nature. And so one of the things that I have learned along in my journey that what you're talking about, LaChelle, points to is that how we frame things internally impacts outcomes, and it impacts subconsciously the decisions that we make.
Yes. And LaChelle, and to Scott's point, I think the key word we're trying to say is word association with psychedelics, right? The word association. Right now, a lot of people associate the word psychedelic with drugs. They don't associate it with medication or plant based, to your point. And I think changing people's mindsets around the word association with psychedelics would make a profound change into how people view psychedelics. I think word association is so important.
Thank you. MH.
Well, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I didn't want to interject, but I was thinking even like Webdelics, right? We have been conditioned just over time with us eliminating a lot of dictionaries and resources. We get online and we go to WebMD, right? So just the whole thing of like Webdelics, that just has a more inclusive type of way to be received rather than some of the other terminology as well. So I just wanted to add that too.
Well, I'm sure everyone at Webdelics.
So
LaChelle,
first, I
thank you.
think everyone brought up some really good ideas and points, and it's always interesting to hear these thoughts or ideas played out. And I think for me, from a personal perspective, I was someone that has been deeply skeptical of psychedelics, given the fact that, as people have mentioned before earlier, it's like the negative connotations associated with them. Before I was introduced to the Webdelics podcast, I had a very minuscule understanding of it. And originally, I thought it was like a drug that made people see a lot of crazy things, right? I think that's the common misperception a lot of people have. And ultimately, what I've been noticing, especially in the episodes that you've been hosting, Scott, is the fact that I also have, in essence, became less of a skeptic, if that makes sense. One of the things that I found very impressive about your podcast episodes, and given my own background, I like to analyze things from a micro to macro perspective. One of the things that I've been enjoying hearing is about people and their personal struggles and how, in essence, this treatment can help them boost their lives or enhance certain things. I know in one of the very earlier episodes, Scott, you talked about your own personal experiences going through certain issues. And I know that was not easy to share. And thank you for expressing that vulnerability. And the other things that I found impressive was other people essentially talking and bringing this idea up, the idea of being in high stress environments, like Mark McNally. And then in more recent episodes, you started discussing about how it could have broader implications for society as a whole. How can it heal racial healing? How can it improve the economy? Granted, I am skeptical about certain things, but it does have a certain potential to open people up. And this is something that I'm fascinated to explore more about.
Thank you. Amazing. If there was a single episode that you listened to, saw, or heard that impacted you the most, what was it? Why?
Oh, there were a few. Can I
Absolutely.
talk? Yeah, Owen Fitzpatrick, I really identified with what he was saying when he was talking about belief, because how you're going to experience something is going to be based on your belief. And beliefs are really important. And I just really resonated with what he was saying, that you're going to have the experience how you believe you're going to have it. And so it brought up a question to me, though, and maybe somebody answered it on one of the other podcasts, but I know where I come from, taking an inside substance to make a change, that's what it feels like to me. Whereas I work on getting people to center within themselves and make the change from within. Okay. Like through meditation, through spiritual mind treatment that we use, through spiritual counseling, all these things. Like I said before, that might not work for some people and they might need this. But what I wondered about is, this is a question. When they have the psychedelic experience and they make the change, is there anyone who would think, according to their beliefs, like, oh, I made this change because I took that? But would they question it? Did I really make the change Or was it because of that? Did I really make the change? And it was just a question that came up to me because of belief. So it was, I don't know if anybody answered that on any of the podcasts that where somebody would actually say, oh my God, I went through this because I took this. And it didn't really, it changed me, but was it because of that? Did I really make the change? It's just a question. So anyway.
Well, oh, I listened to the one about the race focus, and I loved how he described his experience. And he did have a situation where he said he just could feel the transformation, and was very descriptive about how he really had a transformation with abandonment. And just the description, how he felt it coming on. He said he cried for like 3.5 hours. And really this therapeutic process. So I think when you hear somebody's transformation, I'm just left with, does it really matter what led up to that, taking place? And, sometimes we could think, that it's about a specific thing, but it really is like someone who is taking that time to sharpen their axe before they cut down a tree. You're going to do so many swipes at that tree, and the last one is going to make it fall, but everything led up to that. So, one of the things that I noticed was that, everybody had an openness about it. They were like preparing, it was an intention. He talked about cleaning up before, and, he was very mindful of all these things before he took it, which to me just, it has a different kind of energy, so I think, it's all about our intention and how we approach it that way to me. So, I mean, that might have been a catalyst, but there's other work that people did before actually taking things. I think that also should be, included in that equation.
Thank you. Yes, Rita.
I just went through an experience where I did breath flow work, and the gentleman that was leading us, it was a professional, retreat that I was on with well-known people. We did breath flow work. And he used this analogy that I thought was really interesting. He said, well, when you take ayahuasca, per se, you go into a room and the door is shut and you can't get out, right? He said, what I do with my breath work, said, is you can get out if you want to. I shut the door. So you're in total control. Maybe I'm just a control freak, but that really, I went through the breath work with him. It was a 2-hour process. And what you described as an ayahuasca trip happened to me doing the breath work. So I don't know if I'll ever be convinced for myself that I would do these psychedelics, because I feel like there's other ways to get there. But I do validate that it works for people. I validate that. I hope that that's coming across, that I do validate that it works for certain people. But for myself, and when he said that, I thought, oh, that's what it would feel like. Doors shut, you can't get out until it's over. Whereas I like the more sense that I'm going with, and I'm reaching that place with assistance, of course, but also it's me in direct contact. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in.
Well, Rita,
I
I thought you brought up a great point about meditation. I've been starting meditation in the past 6 to 8 months, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think, in my opinion, that is a good first step for someone to try before potentially venturing into psychedelics themselves, because I've seen it positively influence my life in a number of different ways. But I do think meditation has limitations as well, because sometimes it's tough to stick to meditation and continue with it throughout your day. But I do think meditation is definitely a good first step. And it's something that I've really enjoyed over the 6 to 8 months that I've started, because it really, the specific word that you used is that it's centered yourself. And that's what meditation does. A lot of people nowadays, they have trouble with centering themselves because there's so much going on in the world today, and that centering yourself is just so important. And that's what meditation does. But it's hard to keep up with that throughout the day. But I but I do think that's something that can help assist someone center themselves for sure.
I wanted to add something to that too, because I think, you're bringing up good points. And I think, a lot of times, a lot of people struggle with meditation. But, I always ask my clients and children, we meditate on negative things all day, all the time. That's what keeps us in fear and doubt and people who watch the news. But what my point with this is that, what it brings up for me is exploring different ways of introducing things to people as an option because maybe you would think to tell somebody a certain way of how they would take this type of enhancement, however you want to call it. And we could talk about different things that could be included as an option, because as we explore different ways of healing, we can explore different ways of introducing it. I loved how the guy in the episode I listened to, he put it in his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, would anybody even really be thinking about that? So I think if we explore different ways of normalizing the conversation, it doesn't even have to be an issue of control. And I think control is also a good thing to bring up because when you are focusing on meditation and some of these other things with healing, one of the first things you learn is that you're not in control, right? If you really are centering into the fact of energy and being one, you realize that it should be about the flow and letting go of control and surrendering. So anything sometimes to be used as a vehicle to get to that point sometimes is it may not be the one you would choose, but just getting there to being in a place of surrender is the best place to be because you are open to being able to explore different avenues for healing.
Thank you. MH, Kevin, were there particular episodes that impacted you, affected you? And if so, what were they and why?
Yeah, sure. I think I could give it a stab first. And again, I think a lot of people are bringing up some really good ideas in terms of centering, healing, focus. And I think that's one of the benefits when it comes to these types of substances. And I think an episode that somewhat resonated for me and it kind of broke down my skepticism was your episode, I believe, with Manish Jern, the PhD student at McGill.
Yes.
And I think Manish did a really good job in not only going over the history about the war on drugs, but he also covered some of the technical components associated with it. And I think this was also somewhat covered in your topic about the science behind these strips and the values that could bring up. And I think that's something for me, I guess it resonated also with me because, of course, I would like to have the science backing it before anyone consumes any substance, similar to what Rita said before. It's the changes in your brain. And at the same time, I think another reason why psychedelics has been somewhat demonized in the past few years or decades is because sometimes they were considered to be a part of like that new spiritual movement. And that already has like a lot of negative conceptions perceiving it because like certain cultish cults that have occurred in the past. The New Age movement, there you go. That's the name. And so it's kind of interesting to see that segue.
Rita, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you had some questions now after having listened to some of the episodes that you didn't have earlier. And so I'm going to start with you, and I would love to hear from anyone else if they have thoughts about this. Do you have new questions about psychedelics and plant medicines that you didn't have before the Webdelics journey began for you?
I think the questions about the neuroplasticity and what it's doing to my brain, how it's changing my brain, whether that's permanent or not. I know, like, when I go to change a belief, I have to work on it because I know that I'm wired in that belief, whatever it is. Okay. And so let's say it's a belief in lack or whatever, or a belief I'm not worthy or something like that. So I have to work on that. I have to work on it through meditation, through spiritual mind treatment that we use, through counseling, all those things. And I can finally, if I can think enough that positive and find out what the cause of it is, first of all, and then change that cause, because it's not just my thinking, it's my belief, then I've rewired my brain, so to speak. And I know now for a fact, I do not think the same way I thought 20 years ago because of the stuff that I've gone through, spiritually speaking. So I guess I want to know what's happening with the brain. Like what is this? What is it doing to our brain? And is it permanent? Is it a rewire, like a rewire that happens instantaneously with a trip of some, I don't want to use the word trip, but so Scott, I guess that's my question. What is it actually doing in my brain? Is it permanent? I know that when you put those synapses together and with a new thought or a new belief, and it can go away if you start like thinking a different way, or if you start like have some encounter or some traumatic situation happen to you, or you lose a loved one, or whatever it is. So what is happening with our brains? I guess that's my question.
Thank you. Anyone else have any new questions or any things that have come up that you're curious about, skeptical about, or concerned about that you might not have had when we last met?
I think for me, what has come up since this conversation is, what is the process we go through with anything that we introduce to society, whether it's food, healthy medicine, money. We've got digital currency that's coming out. We have this imbalance, I believe, when it comes to certain things where it's introduced and a lot of the questions or that process is not considered until it gets to be a problem. And then we go back and try to fix everything. So this really has opened my eyes to really explore just personally, what is my own set of standards and values when it comes to learning about something new that I may not be, embracing or even aware of, So I think I've just gotten another opportunity to grow within my personal and professional life just from having this conversation. So that's my input thus far.
I think for me personally, I think there's been a lot of my fellow co-panelists have brought up some of these good ideas. And for me, I'm still exploring more and more of this space in itself. But I guess the way that I'm kind of also thinking or viewing it is also like, what can we do in order for us to further expand this access in a safe and legal manner? And I think that's important conversations that you have been talking with your other guests, Scott. And I think part of me is also curious, or what are the long-term implications? What can it do?
Thank you. And I'm really glad that you asked that. And that's something we really want to make sure that we consider. Do you have any last thoughts about your Webdelics journey so far that you would like to share with audience members who are listening or watching this episode? Rita?
Yeah, I think Webdelics is doing a great service to humanity by having this podcast. I think it is so educational, and if you have any questions about this, or what psychedelics are, how they're used, this is like we haven't had this information before in this kind of way. So Scott, I just applaud you for doing something that's really daring too, because there's so much controversy around it. And so much, taboo around it and all of that. So I think that I'm going to encourage people to listen to it. I'm always into opening my mind and learning and finding ways to help people. So I'm very excited about what you're doing. Very excited. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Hey,
LaChelle, I know you have something to say.
I agree wholeheartedly with Rita. I think it's so important to remove judgment. I find that as I listen to these conversations, it helps me to remove judgment. And when you remove judgment, you're more open to being able to hear somebody else's perspective. And, for me, I think that's a step in maturity, because a lot of times just to label something as good or bad, it closes you off from opportunities of even hearing different perspectives, because you've been conditioned to believe certain things. And so you don't really give it a chance. So the thing that you have just put together here with people from different backgrounds and different beliefs, I think is really a great leadership position to be in to really help us, not just with Webdelics, but a lot of things that whether it's with our business or personal life, when it comes to really overcoming limiting beliefs or things that we have believed for years just because it was something that was taught to us, and not even thinking to question it. I love the quote that the gentleman said in his episode. He said something like, you lay your ancestors to rest in the ground, but they're buried in your genes. So I just thought, stuff like that. You're not going to find that if you are not a part of these type of conversations. I love quotes. Those are things that really stick with me after the conversation. So great work you're doing. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you. No, thank you. And I have to attribute that quote. It was
Mhm.
it was Nathaniel Brown who said that in a powerful episode. MH, the last pearl of wisdom, thought, insight is yours. We've lost Kevin, unfortunately, due to some technical issues, but that's okay. He's contributed a lot already. So take the mic and say something. Just say something, MH.
So once again, thank you, Scott, for your service. I know it's also been not an easy journey for you. So for the fact that you're willing to host these vulnerable conversations with people, have these discussions, and ultimately what we could do to further improve not only our personal lives, but I guess the broader human condition. So thank you for it. And I think with my Webdelics journey has been very interesting over this period of time because I certainly have had my reservations with the substance in itself. But right now, what we're seeing is a cultural shift with not only that we're seeing a cultural shift where not only is this being more openly discussed and talked about, but it's also being discussed even further in ways we could further utilize these substances for our own, not only for personal gains, but broader implications. I think there's a beauty behind that. And I think the Webdelics podcast will be a stepping stone for future references. And I think the service that you are doing is great. And everyone that has been a part of the journey. And to that, I say thank you.
Actually, I want to say thank you to you all because you all speak for and represent millions of people out there who are just regular people, who have questions, who have fears, who don't know where to turn and need trusted advice. And you've taken the time to voice some of their concerns, their thoughts, their feelings. And that's, I think, why the original focus group panel has been so successful and why I believe that this one will be too, because of you. My Webdelics friends, it's been great having you on the show today. Thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your insight. You've given us a lot to think about and some expectations that we here at Webdelics need to make sure that we follow through on. And so it's been a privilege having each of you. For those of you who are listening or watching, keep tuning in because in upcoming episodes, we're going to be focusing on plant medicine, psychedelics, and day-to-day life. Can psychedelics turn you away from being a toxic boss? Are psychedelics a viable leadership training and development modality? Can they impact aging and dementia? Will they help you ease the pain when someone, whether it's you or someone that you know, loses an unborn child? Can they help with the pain and the fear and the anxiety that all of us face when we realize that we are at the end of our lives? All of these topics and so much more are coming up soon, and it is my goal to have this focus group come back as some of those episodes roll out and discuss how they feel, what they've learned, and whether anything has changed. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube. And most importantly, tell everyone that you know about what we're doing. Also, don't forget to follow Webdelics on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube. And be sure to check out our website, webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. And sign up to our blog in order to get the most up-to-date, unbiased, and accurate information about psychedelics and plant medicine on the web. And then, most importantly, be sure to come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.